All right. So, welcome to this month's office hours for January. Um, just a reminder this session is being recorded. It's just the presenter's voice and audio, audio and video that are being recorded. The chat is not recorded. But if you have any questions throughout the session that you want answered, feel free to drop your questions at any point. We do have some pre submitted questions that we'll go through, and we'll also try and get to everything that is dropped in the chat as well. Just for a brief intro, my name is Mandy George. I'm one of the Adobe Analytics champions. This is my third year in the program, and I work as a senior e commerce analyst for Staples Canada. And I'll pass it off to the others for intros. Jen, do you want to go next?
Sure, since I'm already unmuted. I'm Jen Dungan. I am also a champion. I have been a champion now for 5 years. So that's something. And I am the optimization manager analytics. I know, strange title, at Torstar, which is a newspaper company up in Canada. Our primary newspaper is the Toronto Star, which you may or may not have heard of, depending on where you're coming from. And we have lots of other newspapers and digital properties. Andy?
Sure. My name is Andy Lunsford. I am also a champion. This is my second year being a champion. I'm very honored to be doing this again this year. Fun fact, Jen is actually a co-leader of Gnome East, which we are as our Adobe Analytics user group. It's really fun. So if you really like the information content here, I'm going to plug that. It's always a good time there. I am director of data instrumentation at a company called Razorfish. It's a consultancy. We support analytics for a lot of big clients. I work specifically in the automotive space, but part of a great team there. And a lot of my day-to-day work is focusing on the fun work of getting analytics tagged and implementing analytics. So I don't spend as much time on the analysis side, but I will spend as dabble in workspace. And I'll hand it over to Christine to introduce herself.
Thanks, Andy. I'm Christine Beatty. This is my first year in the Champions program, so very excited to be here. Thank you. And I work as an implementation manager in Adobe Analytics for a consultancy called EY, and I kind of focus on media and entertainment as my industry. So, pleasure to be here.
Awesome. All right, I will share my screen to show the pre submitted questions. Well, yes, this one. All right. So the first question that we had submitted is, hi, I would like to understand why does CJA do its own identity graph stitching rather than leverage the one from AEP? Isn't this a potential source of inconsistency? I hear this is on the roadmap to be fixed. Can you please confirm? In either case, how do clients handle this as it stands currently? So I think, Andy, you added some comments. Do you want to speak to this one? You are muted.
I can definitely speak to it, but I'm on mute. It's not going to do much good. So, identity graph, to my understanding, and this is definitely something that I think there's been a lot of discussion about. But identity graph is an AEP feature, and CJA, RTCDP, and other products on the Experience platform kind of build on the additional features related to the products. Identity graph being the main kind of underpinning of like the Experience platform, and utilizing that technology in different ways across different products. I believe the specific name I've seen referenced for it on CJA is graph-based stitching of in like fields. So to the point of like them being different identity graphs, I'm not sure if they're entirely different, but there might be different utilizations of that. But because there are differences between the products, and not being able to have like, it's kind of that limitation of, oh, you have CJA, you can utilize this in ways that are relevant for the CJA product set. If you're doing a lot of data analysis or review outside of CJA and you're wanting to utilize the feature of like the device-based like stitching and the field stitching from CJA outside of it, you're probably going to be better off for parity-wise using the AEP one because that's going to be probably more effective. But to your point about things being on the roadmap, there might be issues where it's not as clear, like the delineation between them, and maybe there's some interactions there. That's probably what's on the roadmap. To be completely honest, as Jen has kind of mentioned in her notes, not a lot. We don't really have an inside track or inside view into the Adobe roadmap. So that's going to be kind of something that would be a really good point to go to your like customer care like representative, like your CSM, to kind of say, hey, like, want to know a little bit more about this, because they'll definitely be able to connect you to the right people and give you more insight into some of the issues you're having. I did include some links. We can always share them later. I don't know if we can copy paste them into the chat, but some references to like architecture overview, kind of showing that Identity Graph is its own product that exists on AEP that is then referenced inside the different products outside of it. And also kind of walking through graph-based stitching overview, which is CJA's implementation of using Identity Graph. Hopefully that's a good starting point. Obviously, there's a lot, like you can go down that rabbit hole of like diving into potentially what some of the concerns you have are, like around the inconsistency, where it might be a problem, or if you're just diving into it, it might just be good to kind of get a better overview of like how it's used. And it might be just a naming convention. Unfortunately, this is one of the things where there's a lot of names that sound very similar. So it's definitely something that even champions struggle with kind of sometimes, like, oh, is this referring to this feature or this feature? Just because there's only so many names you can give these kind of products.
Yeah. I don't really have too much to add to that. I mean, especially when it comes to, clients, we don't have either of those. We don't have CJA, nor do we have the graph stitching in the data we do have. So I don't have experience with it, but I do understand why it might be a source of concern for you and inconsistency. I would first see if you are seeing inconsistencies before worrying about it too much. No sense in worrying about something that may or may not exist. And then, of course, as Andy said, if they are different aspects of it, or sort of extensions onto it, again, like everything else, context can change little bits of what the information you're seeing, and that could cause, if somebody pulls out data and they see one value versus another, it could be the context that it was pulled, or various variables, rather than specifically the data itself being inconsistent. It may just be a matter of how it's being pulled or what factors are being calculated into it. So again, I'd first make sure that it is a problem for you, before you get too worried. And if it is, obviously reach out to client care, reach out to your CSM, reach out to anyone that you have access to. And also, feel free to post onto the Experience League, where I know some of the employees frequent as well. They might be able to speak a little bit more to the roadmap or that. But yeah, and if you don't have access to those and it's kind of like a potential blocker for moving forward, talk to your sales team. Get them to bring in technical support that can help alleviate any issues you have before signing on the dotted line.
Yeah, I think another point about the roadmap piece, we don't use CJA, so I can't speak too much about the identity graph part. But yeah, as champions, like none of us actually work for Adobe, so our knowledge into the roadmap is a little bit limited as well. But I believe Adobe does the roadmap series, I think it's twice a year, where they'll actually go through a session and talk about their roadmap. So keep an eye open for those sessions, because they can be, really good understanding, sort of what's coming in the tool. Oh yeah, Ying just commented in the chat. He works for Adobe, but not on the CDA team, but there are the biannual roadmap calls. Yeah, so that's a good place to see what's coming up.
I think we've got a good audience
timing on
here
that
today who can help fill in for
Yeah.
Yang, you're drafted.
Yeah. All right. Anyone else have anything to add for that one? He's not a chatbot. All right.
I hope not, Yang. I've met you in person. If you're a chatbot, you're very good imitation of a person.
Adobe's technology is way beyond what we thought. All right. So the second question that we got was about total form submissions. So, how to prevent total form submissions less than total form viewed, how to preserve the data accuracy for form conversion. Jen, do you want to start this one?
Sure. I mean, like anything, there can be multiple potential issues. And without seeing the actual implementation, I can only guess. So the first could be a tagging issue, or it could be a timing issue. Like depending on how you're tracking, the total, like the form viewed, maybe you've got some logic which is trying to detect if the form was shown on the page. Maybe there's a timing issue that it detects it after your call has been sent. So some of the time, intermittently, it's not sending that view, or maybe it's just failing outright to detect that it's shown, but your submit is okay. The other potential problem is when you are tracking your form submissions, are you tracking only the successful submissions, or are you tracking every time somebody clicks on the button? Because that could make a real big difference to inequity. If somebody loads the form once, types it in, made a typo, hit submit, it's like, oh, this is not a proper email address. So they go back and fix it and submit it again. Oh, this date isn't in proper format. So they submit it again. I mean, that could, in theory, be 3 submissions to one view. They're not real submissions, they're partial submissions. So maybe you need to worry about splitting up your failed versus your successful, and in an attempt to essentially, get the data to look like it's proper. So again, I would first look at, is your implementation correct? Because that's generally where you're probably going to see issues like that. There could be other issues where maybe somebody started the form on day 1 and submitted it on day 2, and you're only looking at day 2. But again, I don't know how big of a discrepancy you're seeing and whether or not that's a valid point of concern, or like where the numbers are being odd for you. So I would say start by testing, and make sure that what you're collecting is what you actually think you're collecting.
And just one quick point on that too, like in terms of the testing, also make sure you're testing like hitting the back button, because there could, to Jen's point, there could be things firing, depending on how it was implemented, it might not be firing on the actual click, but when that page is refreshed into the success. So sometimes there are wacky things that happen on the background. So yeah, to Jen's point, make sure you're testing all kinds of use case scenarios, not just the perfect happy path.
Yeah. I always test it. I always test happy path. And then I test, like, if I was a user who didn't know what I was doing, what silly things might I do on this website? And I will try to do the weirdest flows, the weirdest navigations, using my navigation buttons, using this, going directly to the page, just try everything that you can think of to be like a real user, because you'll never get everything that a real user is going to do. But the more you can try to act like a real user, clicking around randomly and doing stuff, the better you're going to be able to test your implementations.
Yeah, I think a lot of things that we cover right now are really great points. The big things that stick out to me are the fact that submissions being more than viewed. The fact if you're seeing that in your data, that means that there's probably a pretty big issue that's probably easily to identify on testing, and points more to an implementation item, just because form conversion generally is not like a very high metric. So if you're heading more, it's not like a margin of error. It's like something's happening. I go the route, obviously being implementation focused, I go the route of going from it's like the first step to going towards the workspace. But I think it's a good approach, like kind of take the IT approach of like literally going piecemeal by piecemeal, going through like, okay, where is everything? And I think an important piece that looking at these metrics, we've already talked about like on this call about like, oh yeah, form view, maybe there's some logic for this. My mind went to like, oh, maybe they were talking about an enters viewport. I think an important thing that's really valuable when you're setting up your SDR and you're talking through all this is identifying what the exact action is, almost to a point where you feel like you're telling somebody who doesn't understand what a computer is, what action is being taken. And I say that jokingly, but almost like you're communicating that way, because otherwise you're going to get like I write my requirements situation being like, when the user successfully types a character into the form or makes the first form field active is what I consider a form start, for example, for one requirement, because it's very clear, okay, it's not when it comes in the viewport, it's not when the page loads. And another thing is to kind of say like, oh, submitting the form, is it when you're clicking the submit button? Because as Jen mentioned, and I think Christine mentioned as well, is it just failing the submit? Like you have some form validation error that triggers the submit, and you don't, I mean, out of the box launch doesn't trigger submit, like doesn't check to see if it's successfully submitted because there's not an AJAX call. And then finally, there's the fact that like page load, maybe your developer thought, oh, you want to fire on page load and you want it to fire when you submit and the transaction completes, because you want to make sure you collected one of them. If one of them fails, you still have it. And if you're doing that, then you're going to have a situation where you're double counting that, which would easily also cause that issue. And all of those are potential routes. And based on that, if there's some limitations development-wise, you can always go event serialization route. You can get real fancy with that and go those ways. But before you go and do all that, start trying to tear your workspace apart, make sure everyone has the same understanding of what the events are.
Yeah, actually, to speak to that point about, clear definitions of what constitutes this, what constitutes that. This is kind of an analogy that I've used with people in the past. It hopefully gets things through. When you talk about something, people can have a different interpretation of that. So you have to try and be very, very clear, very, very specific about what you're trying to achieve. And an analogy for this is when you are talking to, say, a machine, and you give an instruction, go to that room over there. You tell a person, go to that room over there. A person is going to logically make the leap to leave the room through the door, go down the hall, turn the corner, go down, and go into the room. A machine, on the other hand, is going to go, the room is that direction, and I am going to walk through the wall. So make sure that you are giving clear instructions to that machine to go through the door, go down the hall, turn, and go in the other door. Because otherwise, you're going to get some really unexpected, results if you're not clear.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think just to sort of add on to this, so from my perspective, which is more reporting than implementation side, is what can you do about this when you already have the data in your workspace? So this is something that we actually came across at a previous job. We were reporting on a bunch of forms, and when I did my completion rate, I was getting like 120% for the forms. It's like, all right, no, there's something wrong here. And we came across some of these issues, people pushing back button, having EVAR persistence causing issues. So we handled this a couple of different ways. One thing you can do is, instead of reporting on just the sort of number of forms submitted, you can report on the number of visits that submit a form. So create a segment with your form start or your form submit. You can do one of each, and then make a calculated metric that has visits with that segment applied to it. And so you get the number of visits that saw the form and the number of visits that completed it. So you're sort of deduplicating that. And then when doing a completion rate, have a segment that includes the form start and the form submit. So do a visit level sequential statement where you've got a form start, then a form submit within the same visit, and incorporate that into your metric. And that way you're taking out that deduplication and getting a more accurate number.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Mandy. And if you happen to have, like, say, multiple forms that maybe visit isn't enough, like visit's cutting out too much, try correlating it with other things. Like, do you have a success page, or do you have
Mhm.
this, or do you have that? Like, try to find creative ways of deduping your submissions for the instances that you're looking for. It could be visit, it might be success page, it might be other factors that that you're looking at, maybe the specific success page that you landed on or whatnot. But there's lots of creative ways that you can find to try and after the fact clean up the inflation. But again, you'll know better than we do how your site works and what correlations are going to work best for you.
Yeah, there's lots of ways to use the custom segments and metrics to, sort of clean stuff up because it isn't as much as we all want a perfect implementation. You have to work with your implementation specialist, you have to work with your developers, and that's not always going to be possible. So knowing how to use those components within Workspace flexibly to get what you need is just as important.
Yeah, I think that's a very good call out because I think we all kind of like, I think the wording of the question of how to prevent it kind of like was like, okay, well, here's how you stop it. But the truth of the matter is, a lot of situations you're kind of, okay, that's great to prevent it, but I got all this data. I need to report on this to client stakeholders or my internal stakeholders on this. Like, what do I do with this? That's a great point about like, sometimes you just don't have perfect data and you have to work with it. And I think there's a great call out to go through those. Another one I would say too, and it all depends on how you're measuring it, is if it's understanding based on form and you have multiple forms, maybe use Adobe ID. If you collect Adobe ID in an eVar, you can use that with like both the start and like the view and submit, like existence of that to identify uniques that have that as a segment. Like you can go down the custom segment route just so much of like duplicating it, but it's going to be based on your business needs.
And if you have Workspace and not CJA, even if you do get these issues fixed, you can't fix it retroactively. So you'll still likely need to do something with segments or custom metrics in Workspace for your historical data. If you do have CJA, then you can, make derived fields which do update retroactively. All right. There's no other comments. I'll move on to.
No, but we do have a novel from Josh Stevens.
We do. Should we jump into that?
It's up to you. I want to make sure that we have time to address that question.
Yeah, we've got 1, 2. Yeah, we have 2 questions left that are pre-submitted, so we'll jump to the one in the chat because we've got plenty of time.
Okay.
So I'm working with a client who's implementing Claravine for campaign metadata. One BU works with an agency who appends a creative ID and placement ID to the standard CID. But the internal team only uses standard CID, and I've created a base value using classification rules. The high number of unique values with creative ID and placement ID isn't ideal for Claravine when it's not needed internally. My initial thought was to use regex in processing rules to truncate those IDs, but seems AA processing rules can't use regex. I thought about classifying just the base value, but it seems that only the campaign value itself can be classified. What other ideas would you guys have?
Now, it won't do anything for the URL, but you could use launch and regex rules to truncate it before you send it to your campaign variable. So basically do some pre-processing with JavaScript. But again, I'm not sure how Claravine is working. Claravine may be looking at the specific URL or only looking at the actual data that you're collecting. You're right. Processing rules don't have regex, much to my chagrin, because that would be amazing, but they haven't updated processing rules in quite some time. Ying, note. Please push for regex rules and processing rules. So, I mean, my thought would be, if you can't do it with processing rules and trying to classify the data, it's good, but it only processes every 4 to 6 hours. And still, I'm pretty sure Claravine's going to look directly at your full campaign as opposed to the processed. My idea would be to try and clean it up before it even goes into Adobe, but I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts.
Yeah, if I'm understanding this correctly, it sounds like the important thing you want to preserve out of this is the standard CID, but the one business unit with the agency is appending a creative ID and a placement ID, which is causing some havoc. So based on that, if I'm understanding that correctly, my mind kind of goes to almost utilizing a segment to do it, depending on how many CIDs you're talking about, and using it like still having it group and filter, unless there's something with the creative ID and placement ID being appended that's breaking the formatting because they're using a character that just causes havoc, which absolutely could be the case. Like dealing with that internally with some CID that was put together that added an extra colon in there because some like media agency added a colon in the middle of it and it broke the processing rule entirely. If you don't have that kind of situation, that would be kind of my thought, is to just keep it limited to that. That way you're still breaking it down. If you're having those extra characters that are causing havoc, sorry, I saw the notification. I want to make sure it wasn't any additional context answering your question. But if that's not the case, yeah, to Jed's point, that's something that I've seen done a lot for campaign rules, is to manage it at launch, to kind of have the processing to kind of like take your campaign value and just pull it from the right places and all the different variations and identify it, and then kind of pass it more neatly inside V0. It's really great too if you want to do something where you have like your CIDs, but then you have other media partners that are using UTMs, and you want to be able to support both. You can build the UTMs to map to a campaign value. You can build logic inside of data. Like I really love the mapping table plugin for that, where you can just kind of have like your logic go through like the different checks, and you can have it's easier to fix that at the collection level than try to fix it later. But the truth of the matter is that it's always like it's a fine balance because there's so many variations. The other piece you can go like, which is the least like elegant, least like sophisticated, is just kind of saying, hey, if you're gonna append these, append them this way and put it in this order, and just kind of go back to that team and say, hey, these aren't following a guideline. Like you're already using Claravine, so you're already obviously developing standards and like expectations for the values. This seems like a great add-in to say, hey, you can append these values, but you're gonna need to do them this way. And we can add some fixes in for these right now, like upload some classifications to fix it, or just that in addition to classification rules, but say we're not doing that for other ones. If they don't come in the right way, it's just out of compliance. And it might be an idea like that. Obviously, your results may vary on that. Your mileage may vary depending on like the stakeholders involved and the money being spent on those campaigns. But that's a route you can go to. There's the least elegant, but like sometimes the most effective, of just saying, hey, these are the standards.
I agree with Andy, what you were saying about the standards, and, if there's a common agreed upon delimiter, or, something to make that classification easier or the identification easier, and roll it, not just for Claravine, but for any oncoming vendor, any oncoming camp, like start rolling that out. It's hard. It's very hard, but downstream future data collection will thank you for kind of being forward thinking.
Okay, any other thoughts on that one?
I think Josh has got a few things to investigate and figure out what works. Have fun with that conversation with your devs.
I think that's one of those items that like I'm pretty sure all of us could spend an entire hour talking about campaign tracking, because it's one of those things that no matter if you've spent any time out of time doing reporting or like any work in Adobe Analytics, campaign tracking is one of those things that at some point has come up and like, oh, we have to address this. This is wrong, because it's just, there's so much nuance to it and there's so many stakeholders involved that something breaks at some point.
Yeah.
And lots of opinions.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I thought of one thing. If you do truncate those placement IDs and the creative ID, off of the CID, because you don't need it for the internal team. But if you end up having to work with that business unit and they do need that information, you might want to store it someplace else. So you may want to, create a separate dimension just to hold that data that's been extracted.
Speaking of that point, sorry, I have to jump into this one. One that I highly recommend is, and I've seen it done a lot of implementations I work on, and I highly recommend it whenever I have a chance to kind of make a statement on the SDR, is people will have the page URL, like which is the full URL. So people will do the page URL, no query parameters to kind of get that down. I also recommend doing just the query parameters. Just do the search string. It's a simple, like even if you're not doing it in launch, it's literally as simple as doing location.search for the JavaScript variable. It is highly worth it. The amount of times I've been like, oh crap, was that query parameter included in there? look at the full URL. It's truncated because, of course, it's a very long campaign. We have all these parameters. Being able to kind of go back and say, here's the URL query parameters. I know what the URL was. I can make a segment off that and see all the query parameters has saved me so many times. It is worth the EVAR.
Plus one, that idea.
I've actually been thinking about adding that for about a year and just haven't gotten around to it. So that's like next on my, technical debt, hey, let's throw this in so I've got it kind of thing.
Yeah. All right. So the next question, jumping back to the pre-submitted ones, I've been trying to set up a data stream override rule in Adobe tags/launch based on a region data element from a data layer. No matter what I've tried, the override doesn't work. Who wants to jump in for that one?
I could take a stab at that one. So there's a lot of things going on with this one. And honestly, if you don't mind, Mandy, I might take over the share real quick because I have
Yeah, go for it.
If I can figure out where it is. Oh my gosh. There it is.
Sorry, I just stopped sharing before.
I didn't know
Do
that.
it.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Okay. Select a tab to share. Oh, it doesn't let me do that. Okay, we'll just do window. Oh, I can't do that. Oh. Well, that's a bummer. Okay, well, that's well, never mind. I was going to share a window, but it told me I had to give my system preferences to do that. So let me see if it'll let me do that real quick without kicking me out of the call. But
this is going to be fun.
Well, while I'm doing that, what I would say is there's a lot of places where you can set data stream inside the extent. I'm assuming you're looking at this, you're configuring it through the extension, and whoa, it's not. Oh, okay, there it is. All right. Oh, my password. Okay.
Fingers crossed this keeps Andy in the call and shares the screen. Nope.
Nope.
Okay, Andy will be back momentarily. So if this is your question, please stand by.
Technical difficulties.
We need
It
that
wouldn't be a
screen to show up.
I know.
We need like the Jeopardy music.
Yeah, we should have like on standby. Every time there's a technical thing, we just throw it up on the screen. Like technical difficulties.
It wouldn't be a real webinar without at least one technical difficulty. Let's be real.
Absolutely not. No, you have to have technical difficulties, and let's. I think that should fix it now. Of course, it got rid of everything I had pulled up, so that's fun. But to that point, though, there's a lot of places where you can set the data stream inside launch or tags. I guess we're using the official name. There's a lot of places you can set it up, and there's a lot of places where you can override it. But one of the settings that I think might be causing you a problem is specifically this one. If I share my screen, and it actually goes through.
And I'm just going to say launch for life, hashtag.
Yes. I was so mad when the launch redirect stopped working. I was really upset.
I put I put an extension on my browser and to make the redirect continue to work.
I've been tempted to do that. I haven't done it yet, but I'm getting there. So yeah, let me just save this real quick. Actually, so inside this, and I see Sean just sends data to a report suite to the US. Override rules send data to EU report stream based on the data stream ID. So if you have your data streams configured like this way, where you have them selected from the dropdown, I'm wondering if the issue you're running into is that even though you had that rule that's set to override it, it's eventually coming back up to these. I would almost say if it's possible to move your data stream IDs to a data element and have it go through here, because the problem I've seen with it's a problem. It's a feature that's a problem in my opinion. It's kind of like a limitation of its own. Like, oh, I have to select something. Oh. Okay, let me do this to save it real quick because I want to just build this out real quick. If we do it like an event, let's just set one up. Webs SDK. I have to set variables and everything still.
And Andy, just in case you're not looking at the chat, it looks like Sean, it's Sean's question. And
yeah,
the extension is configured to send data to a report suite for the US. The override rule is to send data to the EU report suite based on the data stream ID. So just for everyone's context to maybe watching the recording or for you.
Nope, that's great context. Yeah, that's good to call that out too. I was reading that, but yes, it's a good context. So yeah, the default you select from the drop down. So what might be happening, I can't confirm or deny it until like I build it out. But what I believe might be happening is when you're sending the event, you have the option to override it, which I'm guessing what you're doing. You're trying to do the data stream override here. Yeah, master data stream configuration. You're trying to say like, no, we're gonna actually override it. Yeah, data stream configuration override. So even though it's supposed to work right here, what I'm guessing is happening is that due to the timing, like due to some timing thing, maybe your launch isn't running in sequence, or maybe just some other intricacy is happening on the site, that this override isn't working as expected. And what I would recommend doing is, instead of having it in this rule, configure your override directly inside the extension itself as a data element to have a rule. Like, so since it's doing it based on EU report suite based on the data stream ID, actually, override goes in the data. Oh, is it overrides for the report suites? Because that was the second part of my question. I was going to talk through the data stream one, but that's the second part of it, because there's a second piece to that when I was reading through that. So yeah, this is, if we're talking the data stream IDs, yes, that's going to be my recommendation, to have it just all in place to make it easier. But if we're talking report suite IDs, this is something I found out when I was working on some for client on my end. When you're going into the specifically a data stream configuration, let me just create a brand new one. You set up your data stream. The thing you have to configure for report suite overrides to work that you might not know is you have to actually go in here. Let's just build something out temporarily. Test schema Adobe, test office hours, boom, boom. We'll set that up. We'll save. We'll add a service. We'll add Adobe Analytics. You actually have to add here your report suite overrides. So you have to go through, scroll through, and add the report suite you want to do the overrides for. If you do not do this part and you just set the report suite override and launch, it'll appear in the schema to show and send that to the other report suite. But what will happen is it won't be processed by Adobe, because, and I'm guessing this is a security thing, so people can't just randomly send people's report suites out of the blue, even though in theory, I guess you could do that with web beacons today. But I think it's a functionality thing based on that, because you can't actually send the report suite unless you configure it here. So you would actually configure all the report suites you want to be able to do the override for. It's not sending to all of them by doing this. It's just giving you the ability to do that. It's giving you the ability to say, hey, I want to send to these. And what you'll see is that when you do this, you'll actually see inside launch. Here, let me just pull one out randomly. Test. Cool. Let's me save that. Cool. Based on that, you should see in launch now the ability to go back to my office hours property. If I select that data stream, well, actually, I don't know what I name it. Test for office hours. Perfect. There we go. Now, when I set up the rule, I do the report suite override. I should be able to have the ability to select from a dropdown my report suite override. So where is it? I always struggle to find it quickly.
Especially when you're on camera and people are
Yeah,
watching.
there's a lot of options too. Maybe it's in the extension configuration. I'm still playing. There's a lot of areas in here. Report suite overrides. There's a section for it. Data stream configuration overrides. I might have to get back to you on that, but there's a spot where basically you can actually select to send to a different report suite based on.
I'm thinking that's got to be in the rule.
I think you're right. I wasn't seeing it in the rule, but
because your rule would say, here's the rule for X and here's the rule for Y, and you want to locations. I would think. I don't actually have the. I'm not on Web SDK yet, so I don't have these options enabled for myself. But it's got to be here somewhere. Wait. What's the data stream? hold on. Oh, that was the data stream though, not the sweep.
Yeah, it's data stream overrides. There's an option though for sending it to, because this is what I did for enabled. Here we go.
Yeah,
Here,
yeah,
that's enabled. There it is. So now, because I've added these, you can see I have them selected as drop downs now. So that would be my next suggestion: is confirm that you see your report suite available as a dropdown. Obviously, you can still use the data element. You don't have to use the dropdown. But if you don't see the dropdown for your report suite, it means it's probably not configured for the override right now. So even if you do send it, and it will let you send it to Web SDK, it's just going to reject it, as opposed to being able to kind of say, oh, I want to send it here, and you select the data element, and it lets you do that. It won't let you. Oh, they are selected from the dropdown extension. Oh, wait, that's your best from earlier, I think. But that would be where I'd go. That would be the route I would go on that, because I'm guessing it's something with that where they just need to be added to that configuration, and then they should be able to be selected from the dropdown. If you can select it from the dropdown, and then you can still set it up that way, and it's still not working, that might be a customer care ticket, because at that point they should be working.
Yeah. Or if you need any additional points or to review any of these steps, feel free to reach out to us on Experience League. Andy's there, I'm there. Mandy's there. Like we're all there on a regular basis. We'll see the question come in, and we'll go, oh yeah, it's a follow up to this if you're still having issues. But it sounds like potentially it might be that they didn't have that first step configured. That you showed, that you said that you had the same problem, that if it wasn't there, it won't work. At least that's fingers crossed.
That's kind of what I'm thinking, because that one is a really tricky one, and it's one you wouldn't think, like, you're so used to setting things directly from launch that you wouldn't think that you need to configure that preemptively. So that was what got me, and I think that got my colleagues as well. So that might be the route. I'll see if we can find a link to talk through a little bit more too. Like, oh, here we go. You already sent the link, Jen.
Oh yeah, that was what I found when I was doing my pre notes for this. I wasn't sure if that was what they were referring to or not, so I threw that into the workspace. Also, Sean has followed up and said that looks like setting to additional report suites, not based on the regional condition, but not sure. But I think you actually have to set up conditions on your rules for this one goes to US and this one goes to
yes, that's exactly what it is. No, it looks like at first glance that when you select all of them, you're sending it to all of them at once inside the data stream configuration. You're just enabling the ability to send them, is what it does. Because it looks like from the selections, you have the multiple selection drop down, that like by checking all these, I'm overriding and saying I'm going to send it to all these at once. No, you're just basically saying these are options to be available to send to other report suites. It is not very clear at first. I will fully admit that, because I ran that same problem. I just sent the same link that Jen sent, but it's a link directly down to the data stream override section. They'll get you there because it's a very long page. It talks through that a little bit more about how you add the overrides first, then you can have them available to select. That would be what I would try. And if you have a hard time seeing a lot of report suites, like a lot of us do, like I think there's a account I had that's like over 2,000 report suites. You can switch to the batch mode and not have to click them individually, and it's very nice. It'll save you some time.
And again, if it still doesn't work, because I know there's a lot of information packed into a very short amount of time, and you're still having problems, reach out to us on Experience League, and we'll continue the conversation.
Yeah, and this is all recorded, so if you need to go through Andy's answer again, the pinned message that I have at the top of the channel is a link to the YouTube playlist where this will be posted within the next day or two. All right, so let me go back to sharing my screen. All right, we are down to our final two pre-submitted questions, which is sort of a 2-in-1. So the first one is filter table by metric values. Example, only show pages with greater than 1,000 visits. Reason, when comparing date range by percent change, the lowest volume, highest volatility dimension values dominate the report. We want to remove them. So this is something that we've seen a fair bit, and I built out a bit of an example here for us to kind of go through for the first part of the question. Um, so I've got, and again, this is sample data, so there may be some oddities in it. But we've got our product SKUs, online orders, and conversion. So right now, sorted by online orders is good. And like the issue that was mentioned, if you go to sort by something like conversion rate, that's a percentage. Some of your top items might be, really low traffic ones. So the sort of workaround for this, because you can't actually filter based on a metric here, although that would be a good idea if anybody wants to
I,
suggest it as an
there
idea.
is. It's already an
Is
idea.
there?
I'm
So if
posting
anybody
it. I'm
wants
going
to upvote,
to upvote
upvote
this.
the idea that Jen just put in the chat. But the workaround for this in the meantime is to build a metric using nested functions. Um, so if you haven't used the functions before, they are very handy. So down here, there's about 80 different functions that you can use. And in this one here, we're going to use two of them. There's the if function and then the greater than. So when you bring in the if function, it has a logical test and then a value if true and a value if false. Within our logical test, we put the greater than or equal to function, which does a comparison. So I'm comparing online orders to a metric, and I picked 1,500 just based on the data that we have. I know their question was 1,000, but this is a static number, so you can make this number whatever you want. And then if true, it returns the conversion rate, and if false, it returns a 0. And yeah, thank you for the promotion, Christine. So Christine just added into the chat that I recently published a playbook on how to use all 78 different advanced functions. And I've got a webinar in 2 weeks that's going to talk about the playbook. I like nerding out about metrics. It's quite fun. But yeah, so once you build out your logical test with your greater than and then your value if true, you now have something like this. So when I sort by conversion rate with my calculated function, you'll notice here anything that has orders of less than 1,500, the returned conversion rate is 0. So it doesn't remove them from the table, but it does push them all to the bottom. And everything that does have a conversion rate, you can see the online orders is 1,500 or above. And so you can sort of modify this to be whatever you need. You can do a greater than, you can do a less than, you can do basically whatever you want for your logical test to only return a value for certain conditions.
Yeah. And I just want to add on to that. Like as Mandy kind of pointed out, it will return 0 on all the rows that don't meet the condition. It won't remove them completely. And it will also, your total at the top or your average at the top, depending on what you're doing, whether you're doing a conversion rate or straight up number of orders, it will give you the total, not the filtered total for the ones that are above 1,500, because unfortunately your total has more than 1,500 orders. Therefore, it's going to calculate the entire thing as a whole, not the filtered values. So you might want to hide that top totals in case somebody thinks it's actually averaging or just summing up the filtered values.
So yeah, so like Jen said, you can go under here, under the settings, and turn on or off the showing totals and just turn that off. So that way, any business partners don't get confused. Anyone have anything else to add?
just upvote the option for us to actually filter by greater than this, lower than this, or between these two values, because honestly, we really need it.
Yeah. All right. And then the second question was sort a table by dimension values, like we can when segment names are in rows instead of dimensions. So this one here, when you've got something that's like day, you can sort based on the name. But when you have something like product, it doesn't let you. You've got a filter icon here instead. But if you were to sort of select all of your rows, and I think I missed one, but still it's going to work the same. Right click and display only selected rows. Then that filter icon goes away and it does give you the option to sort ascending or descending. But this does come with its own issues. So it removes the deduplication from this grand total here. So if I were to actually, let me do this again with orders just to show what it's doing. So with orders, we've got 43,554. I select all my rows, display only selected. And now instead of 43,000, I had 58,000. So it removes the deduplication. So same as with the other option, probably a good idea to get rid of the totals.
And for anyone wondering, basically when you do that, it essentially converts every single row into like a quick segment that has been dragged into the table. So just like when you pull segments into your freeform table, it doesn't dedupe across those. It won't dedupe across these either because they're essentially quick segments.
Any other points to add for either of these? This is our last pre-submitted question. So if anybody has questions in the chat, we still have 6 minutes left. So time for one more if anybody has anything.
Oh, there's a question about Report Builder. Sort of. About the Report Builder.
Yeah.
That's
so
a big
there's
problem.
a new one. Yeah. And Report Builder got a much needed update a few months ago.
Yes. Okay. The question is, can we schedule the report? Yes, there is a scheduler available in Report Builder. I don't have Excel open at the moment to show it, but you can schedule the reports and they will send out on schedule. If you need to modify those schedules, scheduled Report Builder reports do not show up in the same area as your scheduled projects. You actually have to go into Mandy, I'm not sure if maybe we've got access in the sandbox or not. I don't think we have admin access, but we can try. If you share your screen again.
Yeah,
and you're talking, Jen, about the old Report Builder, right?
Oh, I'm pretty sure both. Are you saying the new Report Builder doesn't have scheduler?
Not yet.
Not yet.
God.
It's coming.
This year, I think, right?
Yeah, I was on a call with Adobe earlier this week, and they said it should be in the next quarter or two. But that also wasn't a confirmed on the roadmap. That is,
really?
They're working on it.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, so you might want to continue to use the old one if you want schedules.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They are working on it.
I agree. I completely agree with Sad. I did not realize I have not switched any of our reports over to the new Report Builder yet because I haven't built any new reports. I basically have all my old historical ones, and they are, I'm going to say massive because there's like 130 API requests in my Report Builder report. So I don't relish rebuilding that anytime soon. However, if you do need to go into the scheduler, here is where you find it. Components, projects and reports, and the ARB scheduled reports, where you can see all of the report builder scheduled reports, at least for the old report builder.
And one quick tale of caution / heads up for people that have not started using the new one but would like to. It is behind the Microsoft Store. So if you have a corporate laptop that has Microsoft Store locked down, which I do and a lot of my clients do, start the process now with your IT to try and get that resolved or try to get it unlocked. I have been working on it for about 3 months now, so it can take a very long time. So even if you're kind of on the fence of like, I would start the process now, just as a heads up.
Funny, actually, as you mentioned that, Christine, my work laptop is locked from being able to open the store. However, I was able to download the new report builder by going directly to the website link and clicking on the link. For some reason, that bypassed whatever block my company had put on the store. So double check that when you look up the Adobe new report builder and you go to their nice, pretty website that shows the new report builder in action, and there's a link down at the bottom about get it might work for you. Might. No guarantees, because I mean every system does different blocks, but I know I cannot get into the store. I can't do anything with the store, and I was really worried that I was not going to be able to get the report builder, and I was able to.
I'm going to call you for all my report builder queries.
Okay, that works.
Just kidding.
So I was going to say there was a message, like a question from May, but I think maybe you just answered about the CSV or PDF for exports. To that front, I mean, you can't get it directly to an Excel format, but luckily, like if you're just needing to pull the data just into a spreadsheet format, you can always right-click any of like in your workspaces, you want to pull that specific section down. You can always, it's a fun little trick. You don't have to just export the whole workspace. You can go specifically to the area where you want that data from, right-click it, and then just click download a CSV. There's an option to do download selection. So if you only want to do like the first 20 rows, you can do it that way.
And Andy,
we lost Andy again.
I will continue where Andy left off. There is a download selection, or there is download the table. And the table, you can actually download up to 50,000 rows of data. I don't know if you've actually, can you go back to the workspace? You should be able to do a demo, Mandy.
Yeah.
So that table right there, if you right click on product, and there is a get rid of the menu.
There we go.
Yeah, there is download items as CSV product, and then there's download selection as CSV. So the download items as CSV will download up to 50,000 items, versus the download selection where you actually have to select which rows you want to export.
Yeah, and if you do like I did and you right click on the header and download selection as CSV, it'll only download the header row. It won't download all of the rows. So you actually have to select what you want with the download selection. Whereas the download item, you can click on the header and it'll download all the items under that header, up to 50,000.
Now, granted, in Report Builder, you're probably not pulling out 50,000 rows of data. I don't know what the max is, but most people, it's like top 10 or top 25 or, whatever it may be. Or maybe you're just, pulling out a range of time, raw data. But hopefully that will work for you if you're not using the old Report Builder.
Yep. Just quickly, there was another follow-up question. Will the new report builder have an option to send report in Excel SX format? So the report builder is built right in Excel. So you can save it as sort of whichever spreadsheet format you want.
Yeah.
Andy, welcome back. Jen finished answering the question for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I heard that, and then I saw the screen freeze, and like I heard everybody talking. I was like, "Oh no!" And then all of a sudden, everything crashed. So I got to witness me dropping out in real time and then drop out.
All right, so this brings us to the hour. Does anyone have any closing comments before we drop off?
Just thank you everyone for your questions. I think this was a great session. Sorry we don't have insights into the Adobe roadmap, but that's why the roadmap series exists. We can all sort of gain as much information as we can together, and then we'll just find out about certain things by surprise when Adobe's like, "Oh yeah, we forgot to mention it," but here you go.
Yep. All right. Thanks, everyone. If you haven't joined the user group, make sure to join. That way you get notified of any future sessions. And while you're there, check out some other user groups. I hear No Meast is pretty cool. So maybe check that one out too. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.